Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this second episode of Tudor History in 10. And I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Sarah Bendall from the Catholic University in Melbourne, I understand.
Yes, I am.
So, Sarah, we've got 10 minutes to talk about a fascinating subject. We recently did a podcast about it and a very, very popular blog on my blog, and it's on the back of your recent book. So, do you just want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your book?
Sure. So my name's Sarah Bendall. I'm a material culture historian. I specialise particularly in Tudor and Stuart England, in the dress of Tudor and Stuart England, I should say. And I've just published a book called Shaping Femininity. So it's about the first corsets and hoop skirts in England during the 16th and the 17th centuries and the ways that they shaped perceptions of femininity and, women's lives.
So it is a fascinating subject. I learned so much from you. And folks, if you love or are interested in Tudor clothing, and I know so many people are, you will love our chat. And particularly, we're going to be talking about one particular aspect, and that is the busk. So if you've never heard about busk and their secret and erotic life, this is for you. So maybe you can start off just by talking to us a little bit about, because busks were part of the upper garments, undergarments worn by ladies. So maybe you can describe a little bit about those upper garments and the role of the busk, what it was, in fact.
Yeah, sure. So a busk is a long piece of, at the time, it was like wood or whale baleen or metal that was placed down the front of bodies, which was the name for these early types of corsets. But it's also where we get the name bodice from. So bodice is just the upper sort of torso covering garment in this period. So it means a lot of different things. And so actually, I have a picture. This is what a busk
That's very
looks like.
helpful, yes.
So it's just a good visual prompt. So yeah, it's just a long piece of, as I said, some sort of hard material that's placed down the front of a bodice or a pair of bodies. And it's really, its function is to sort of keep you from slouching. So you have to sort of sit upright, which was, I guess, the main feature of these garments at the period too. Funnily enough, though, busks become around before corsets do. So it's really sort of, people start to put busks in the bodices of their gowns during the Elizabethan period. So, we can track Elizabeth. She has busks before she has corsets. And then it's really sort of, they become an integral part of these sort of pairs of bodies, or whalebone bodies as they're called at the time, which then sort of have structure distributed more throughout the garment. But yeah, that's basically the function of a busk, and it was placed down the front.
So just talk to us a little bit about the feminine form, the ideal feminine form, and how bodies and busks helped create that shape, whatever that shape was.
Yeah. So the ideal form, and this applies to men's bodies as well, sort of this aristocratic body during the late 16th century, is this sort of upright, formal, good deportment, good posture. So it's power dressing. It's all about power. So you want to radiate confidence. And the way that you do that is through your dress and through the way you carry yourself. So yeah, as I said, sort of upright posture. That's why we have ruffs as well, because that sort of makes you hold your head in a certain way, as well as, the material wealth of having all of that linen fabric in there. So the ideal for women and men is this sort of upright posture. And then for women, it's sort of delves into ideas of gracefulness, of ideas of, unfortunately, not having a disability, because as a woman, you are expected to sort of further the line of your husband. But then there's also this interesting mix of, this sort of idea of gracefulness, upright deportment, which is intermingled with power. But then sort of the female body is also like small breasts during this period are preferred. So particularly sort of Elizabethan bodices and then whalebone bodies, they tend to flatten the chest area compared to later centuries where they sort of, your chest area is pushed up. So that's really the feminine ideal at the time, that sort of slender, straight, bodies, actual bodies, female bodies with minimal breasts. And Elizabeth I is really an embodiment of that in her portraiture. So that's sort of the ideal at the time, and that's an ideal that bodies helped to create on women.
Okay, now it's amazing how quickly the time slips away in this conversation. We must talk about, as I said, this erotic other life of busks, which was seemingly a very normal, very unexciting piece of wood or whalebone. But tell us about the other side of busks, Sarah.
Yeah, so the other side is that busks make it into a lot of the bawdy and erotic literature during this period, especially the early part of this period. They're very much associated with have these sexual undertones and this bawdiness. And it's sort of the late 17th century when they start to be more sort of romantic, sort of talked about in a more romantic way. So, but particularly during the Tudor period, in sort of the city comedies that you get around this time, John Marsden, Ben Jonson, those sort of people, they're writing about busks, and busks are always sort of used in a very sexual way because they're placed between a woman's breasts and also near her groin. So there's examples in the sort of these plays of courtesans saying to, or I guess a madam saying to her sort of courtesans, like, don't give your busks away freely, as, a way to sort of like imply, like, don't give yourself away too freely. By the later 17th century, they're often inscribed with sort of love tokens and love sayings, and then men give them to women. I guess the more playful parts of busks, besides they're quite phallic, so there's a lot of sort of phallic jokes about busks at this time. But the busk was tied into
phallic just because of their shape, basically, and also
just because of their shape. So there's a great one talking about a woman taking her busk out and pretending it's an erect penis. So sort of this really bawdy sort of literature. And that goes as well for something called a busk point, which is a piece of ribbon that was used to tie the busk in. And so there's all of these sort of double entendres about, and so this sat over the top of the groin. And so there's these double entendres about like women playing with their busk points. And I'll leave the viewers to like understand what that means. So yeah, they become part of this very sort of erotic and bawdy culture of sort of the late Tudor and sort of Elizabethan and Stuart period. Yeah, they're fascinating objects.
I mean, who knew? Who knew? And you pointed out to me, you pointed out that they point down right into the groin. And of course, if you imagine sitting in particular, particularly with those very elongated Elizabethan shapes, you can see they were really dug deep down into the groin and where these connections came about.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just so you don't slouch, you sit upright. But then you get these sort of connections, which I find fascinating, because you have this sort of elite garment that then becomes more widespread. And I talk about this in my book particularly during the 17th century. But then it just becomes associated with all these other meanings.
So it's absolutely fascinating. Now, time is ticking away for us. We've only just got about just over a minute or so left now.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I know, it's amazing, isn't it? But where could people go to see busks? Because some of them do survive, don't they?
Yeah, so there's some in the Victoria and Albert Museum. There's tons in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And those collections, if they're not on display, there's definitely like a great online catalogs for those collections. So you can just type in busk, Busk, and you'll bring them all up.
And as I mentioned at the top of this chat, you did a wonderful podcast recording with me. I learned so much about female undergarments and busts. And if people want to know more, I will put a link in the description with this particular video. And I really urge you to go along, because Sarah goes into so much more detail. It's absolutely fascinating. And you kindly also did a blog to go along with that. So I'll also put a link to the blog. Now, in the last sort of 20 seconds or so, Sarah, where can people find your book and where can they connect with you?
Yeah, of course. So you can buy Shaping Femininity directly from Bloomsbury, or you can get it on Amazon, Blackwell's Book Depository, all your sort of like classic bookstores. And you can find me on sarahbendall.com.
Great, because we're out of time. Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah. I hope those of you tuning in have had your appetite whetted to find out a little bit more about female undergarments and about the busk. So thanks, Sarah. It's been a pleasure.
No, thank you so much for having me.